The scandalous truth about experiments in Area 51.
There were two guys in white lab coats facing me towards the door, and they were looking down and talking to something small with long arms.
The mysterious glowing discs over Skinwalker Ranch.
It was a classic disc-shaped craft.
Mass disappearances of cattle and people all over the world.
They just released me back to the ground, and I fell.
In addition to all of these things, since time immemorial, people have stumbled across artifacts of unknown origin that couldn't possibly be human-made. Well then, why, despite so much proof, do we still doubt the existence of aliens? Various cultures preserved ancient mentions of extraterrestrial beings that descended from the sky and bestowed knowledge on people. Say, in Hindu legends, beings that were believed to be gods were said to have arrived in vimanas, flying chariots of sorts. Some called those levitating machines self-moving aerial cars without animals, while others referred to them as mechanical birds. Illustrations and descriptions of these objects were found in the manuscript called Vaimanika Shastra, which can be translated as the science of aeronautics. According to this text, vimanas could be used to travel in space and underwater. But the most exciting part is that after they met the mysterious aliens from the sky, ancient Indians started inventing things way ahead of their time compared to the standard pace of human progress. Somewhere around the 3rd century BC, Indian scientists created a copper skull that could answer yes or no questions. The ancient device worked using the binary system implemented in modern-day computers. But Indians weren't the only people to get help from the mysterious people from the sky. Just look at these hieroglyphs found in the Temple of Hathor in the Egyptian city of Dendera. The illustrations seem to depict an analog of the modern-day light bulb, although scientists mock the assumption that ancient Egypt was developed enough to discover electricity as early as in 2250 BC. That doesn't stop them from contradicting themselves when they claim complex constructions like pyramids could not be built by Egyptians by themselves either. Most importantly, scientists don't have any theories as to who helped them. Could they be the beings that came to Egypt in their flying machines? There's even proof of it. The helicopter hieroglyphs. They were discovered in the mortuary temple of Pharaoh Seti I in the ancient Egyptian city of Abydos. The carvings depict something that resembles the modern-day helicopter, submarine, and airship. This suggests that ancient Egyptians either had access to 20th century technology or could communicate with those who used it. But even in this case, researchers found a way to disprove the theory of a UFO Earth contact. They believe the carvings might have been the result of Seti I's son, Ramses II, fixing the text a little. Egypt's new king wrote the inscription over his father's title, which used to be the Repeller of Egypt's 9 Enemies. Now, the inscription says, the Protector of Egypt and Conqueror of Other Countries. This is Ramesses' title. But the uncanny resemblance between the hieroglyphs and the images of modern-day vehicles makes us doubt this hypothesis. After all, drawings of technological innovations were discovered on ancient artifacts of other cultures too. These stones were found in the Ica province in Peru. They were allegedly carved sometime between the 400s and 700s AD. The total number of these artifacts in museums and private collections reaches as many as 50,000 items. The stones depict seemingly incompatible subjects, extinct animals, a heart transplant, and even fights between dinosaurs and people. Anti-evolutionists such as Carl Bau consider these stones the greatest discovery in history. They believe them to prove that Earth is only a few thousand years old and people actually coexisted with dinosaurs. But formal science shuns the Ica stones. That could be because the information they carry could destroy all of our ideas of the past, and also perhaps because some of them depict strange flying objects. They look like stylized mechanical birds, and one of the stones even shows a watch over a comet on board a flying machine. Since anything relating to the presence of UFOs on our planet is subjected to debunking attempts, the Ica stones also got a more down-to-earth explanation. Scientists are trying to convince us these stones are a falsification and were actually made in a workshop near the city of Ica to attract tourists. But some details revealed during the examination of the stones point to the contrary. The carvings contain no microparticles of metal or other traces of modern-day tools. The stones also contain the remains of microorganisms and other organic matter, which implies they've been buried underground for a long time. Sadly, none of the depicted flying machines was preserved to this day to prove that the Ica stones are authentic. What was preserved is quite an interesting artifact from ancient Greece. Look at this curious mechanism. It was initially identified as an ancient clock because it had the same gears as modern-day timepieces. But when scientists created a model to find out how the mechanism looked in real life, it turned out that it used to have 9 hands, each rotating at its own pace. More precise time measurement wasn't their purpose at all. What they did measure was seasons, the moon's orbit, the lunar phases, and 5 other astronomical cycles. Scientists discovered that the device was created as early as in the second half of the 2nd century BC. The device was dubbed the Antikythera mechanism after the Greek island near which it was discovered by divers in 1900. The device turned out to be the oldest example of a hand-powered analog computer. It could predict astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. But it's tough to believe that such a mechanism could be invented in an ancient culture that used urine to whiten teeth and thought bolts of lightning manifested the wrath of Zeus. Feels like such a mechanism could only be created with outside help. The results of such help can't even be noticed in the art of our less distant ancestors. Just look at the flying objects in the fresco depicting the crucifixion. None of these pilots has a halo, which rules out their divine nature. A UFO is also clearly visible in the religious painting Miracle of the Snow, the portrait of the Madonna with Saint Giovannino, and even the painting Baptism of Jesus. Yeah, people likely discovered out-of-time artifacts accidentally, and flying objects in paintings are nothing more than products of imagination. But in that case, how could we explain the mysterious and still undeciphered Voynich manuscript? The manuscript is an illustrated codex, presumably handwritten in the early 15th century, most likely in Italy. Some illustrations in the book are reminiscent of a plant cell, others of a galaxy. There are also drawings of people, imaginary plants, and astrological symbols. But here's the rub. There were no telescopes or microscopes back when the manuscript was written. The book looks like a notebook that an alien used to write down their observations of our planet and then carelessly left behind on Earth. Scientists still struggle to understand what the book says and, most importantly, who wrote it. Maybe while we're trying to find proof of aliens' existence, they are already near, and we are the subject of their studies. In the 1970s, people at SKINWALKER Ranch in Ballard, Utah started witnessing strange things that escalated to something scary. It all began with mysterious crop circles. The sky would light up instantly, and cows would disappear without a trace. Not long after that, they would be found dissected with such surgical precision that simply ruled out typical coyote attacks. One time, the owner of the SKINWALKER farm, Terry Sherman, saw glowing blue spheres in the sky and decided to chase them. For his safety, he released the dogs to run before him. As he recalled later, the flying objects in the sky soon vanished suddenly, and he heard the dogs whining. The man claims that when he rushed after his pets, all he found was scorched earth and weird, greasy spots. He believed those were his dog's charred remains. As it turns out, such incidents began to happen in this area long ago. In the 1700s, right at the spot where the ranch would be built later, the first Spanish explorers noticed strange flying objects dash above their campfires at night. Since then, the glowing orbs in the sky never let the people of Skinwalker live quietly. Events were no less disturbing in Roswell, New Mexico. In 1947, a local farmer and a sheriff found a strange flying disc in the desert surrounding the city. They said it resembled an alien ship that had apparently crashed. The U.S. Army immediately arrived at the scene and hastily moved the object to the nearest scientific base. Local media were quick to trumpet the news about a spacecraft, but for some reason, 2 days later, the official story was changed. The new version was that a weather balloon had exploded, so the fuss around the UFO blew over. A few decades later, a local found a strange rock in the same desert. When he brought it home and cleaned the dirt off, he saw symbols showing lunar cycles on the smooth surface. But this artifact was also seized by the feds, although experts still haven't found out what technology allowed such a skillful drawing on hard stone, because no traces of any tool were visible, not even under a microscope. It was as if the patterns were carved with some state-of-the-art laser. Plus, the image bore a striking resemblance to the mysterious crop circles discovered in the United Kingdom in 1996. Researchers' devices helped track magnetic anomalies in the field. The rock from Roswell has similar abilities. When a magnet was placed under it, it started to spin. But in the case of the crop circles, an explanation was actually found, even though it's hard to say how viable it is. Dave Chorley and Doug Bauer contacted journalists themselves and admitted that they would often have a few and then do all kinds of pranks while they were liquored up. One of their favorite pastimes was to get out late at night and draw crop circles using simple planks, ropes, and wire. The guys never expected such a fuss in the media and decided to go on with the prank, creating more and more complex patterns each time. The whole thing ended with Dave and Doug receiving the Ig Nobel Prize in Physics. The only inconsistency in this story is how, with nothing but the simplest tools, the two managed to create such geometrically perfect patterns on such a large scale without getting noticed, and in several countries at that. After all, identical intricate patterns were also found in the Sahara. Even more questions are raised in the case that happened in 1974 in Fort George Island, Florida. That was where, one ordinary day, the Betts family found a mysterious orb near their house that would turn their lives upside down. It was a metal sphere slightly smaller but much heavier than a bowling ball. At first, the Bettses thought it to be an old Spanish colonial cannonball. That speculation was quickly dismissed because the sphere would have grown rusty if it had lied around for so long, but it looked almost like new. As soon as the family brought the sphere into the house, it suddenly began to roll, make noises, and vibrate. It was as if it was trying to study the space in front of itself and all of its surroundings. When the remarkable discovery was reported in the New York Times and the Daily Telegraph, the military and scientists flocked to Florida from all over the world. Expert analysis showed that the sphere emitted radio waves and had a magnetic field, but its contents remained a mystery. It felt like the sphere was created somewhere outside Earth and was trying to transmit a signal, but it was never deciphered. When the Bettses got the mysterious artifact back, they disappeared without a trace. Journalists went out of their way to find the family, searching for a long time, but to no avail. Everyone and their dog offered their own opinion on where the Bettses had gone. One of the craziest guesses was that they were abducted by aliens who would return to take their device back. The most reasonable ones speculated that the Betzes had been hidden by the government. Some even said the witnesses of the extraterrestrial discovery had been killed. As for all the other eyewitnesses who found inexplicable artifacts and saw strange flying objects over their farms and fields, the media did not hesitate to call them crazy weirdos. But everything changed when the military also started noticing similar things. They could check whether what they saw was real using special equipment. That was the case with David Fravor, a former U.S. Navy pilot. David recounted a training flight he'd had over the Pacific Ocean near the Mexico-United States border in 2004, 160 kilometers from the coast between San Diego and Ensenada. The man noticed a strange apparatus hovering above the water. Radar picked it up too. The object was smooth, white, and elongated. In a word, it looked like a 12-meter-long tic-tac mint. As Fravor pointed out, when the object noticed his jet, it began to behave aggressively, abruptly changing altitude, disappearing, blocking the radar, and moving erratically. If there was a person inside the machine, they would have been torn to pieces from the overload. The tic-tac ended up getting away from unwanted observers at the breakneck supersonic speed of 100 kilometers per minute. But the strangest thing was that at the same time, it didn't leave any contrail whatsoever. According to the New York Times, from 2014 to 2015, U.S. Navy pilots regularly encountered mysterious objects hovering in the sky, but the Pentagon doesn't reveal what the military actually saw, only clarifying that some of the objects might have been unregistered drones. Something similar also happened to a Russian submarine in the Pacific Ocean. The sonar located 6 unknown objects moving with an incredible speed of over 425 kilometers per hour, and when the crew performed emergency surfacing, the unknown objects spurted out of the water and disappeared into the sky. So, if the aliens can really observe people, their equipment most often helps them go unnoticed, and if need be, they can quickly escape from the scene. But what if they get help not only from their devices, but also from certain people on Earth? On May the 24th, 1989, going live on the KLAS TV station, a man under the alias Dennis claimed that the U.S. government isn't telling the people about as many as 9 crashed spaceships. Dennis didn't know how the authorities got hold of them, but allegedly witnessed them hidden away at a closed-off base in Area 51. The alias, Dennis, concealed engineering physicist Bob Lazar. He says he had a stint at the secret military base in Nevada. Bob's account revealed genuinely incredible things. He was entrusted with developing an engine for a new generation military vehicle, except the engine was to be inspired by another flying object hidden inside the facility. When Bob first saw the vehicle, he thought it was just an advanced saucer-shaped fighter jet. At that time, the physicist figured that all the eyewitnesses of the UFOs he'd read about in the newspapers or saw on TV simply mistook a secret military flying object for an alien ship. But when he began to study the vehicle details, he realized that nothing was as simple as it initially seemed. The flying object's reactor resembled a basketball with a metal plate and created its own gravitational field. This is something our civilization is unable to develop at this point in history. According to Lazar, the vehicle's gravitational engine operated on element 115, unknown on Earth. That meant Bob was looking at a real alien ship. The extraterrestrial element allowed the flying saucer to warp space according to its pilot's needs. Bob says the scientists were required to work with atoms and isotopes to try to recreate the element, albeit with whatever they had on hand. Even the ship's cover was made of another material unknown to people. Moreover, the vehicle seemed to be molded from one solid piece because it had no welding traces. And for some reason, the ship's cabins were so tiny that a human pilot simply wouldn't fit in them. But Bob found an explanation for that too. One day he accidentally glanced into the window of one of the lab rooms at the base and saw small extraterrestrial creatures, which the employees dubbed
The kids.
because of their short stature. Of course, Bob might have made it all up, but he's not the only one who's been to the secret bases and seen something similar there. This is Jackie Gleason, an American comedy actor whose most famous role was that of a New York bus driver in the Honeymooners TV show. Besides his career, he had a hobby that people deemed no less funny. He took an interest in UFOs. The actor read a lot of books about aliens and all sorts of paranormal activity. The only one who didn't mock Jackie's odd hobby was his biggest and most famous fan, Richard Nixon. The 37th president of the U.S. enjoyed golfing with the famous actor and even going out for drinks with him. One night, when they'd had a few drinks too many, Nixon decided to take his friend to a secret facility, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And there, he showed his pals something resembling the pieces of a flying saucer. But according to Jackie, it wasn't the most astonishing thing. President Nixon and actor Jackie Gleason entered one of the labs. It was full of freezers that looked like soda fridges. But on closer inspection, Jackie realized those were tanks with the mutilated remains of what the actor first mistook for
Kids.
Just like in Bob Lazarus' story, the kids turned out to be the bodies of aliens. After returning home, Gleason couldn't sleep. He kept seeing the nightmarish pictures of what he'd seen at the base. Beverly McKittrick, the actor's wife, raised hell with her husband for coming home so late and looking really shady. Then the actor told her about the tour of the secret base with the UFO and alien bodies. Jackie asked her to swear she would never tell his secret to anyone, and she promised. Thanks to this woman, you can also hear about that legendary night. Jackie was distraught the story got out, but he never denied it. After the scoop was published, Gleason got a job offer. He would design and build houses in the shape of the flying saucers he allegedly saw. Sadly, Bob Lazar wasn't as lucky as Gleason. He received no good cooperation offers. Quite the contrary. When Bob went public with his story, he was flooded with accusations of slander. The colleagues Bob used to attend, and naturally, the administration of Sector 4, where the physicist allegedly worked, claimed they'd never seen the lunatic before. Of course, the papers that would prove his expertise in physics and engineering suddenly disappeared too. But over time, public interest in Bob subsided, and he returned to his ordinary life. He even started his own business, selling scientific supplies. All was well until 30 years after the first talks about Area 51. In the middle of shooting a documentary about his life, Bob's store was raided by the FBI and the local police. They called their unexpected visit a regular inspection. Bob believes that the feds are still trying to find the samples of element 115, which, as it was revealed, the physicists stole from the secret base. Even though Bob's story is so complicated, the world was inspired by tales of extraterrestrial civilizations on our planet, and it's still waiting for the truth. What about you? Do you believe Bob Lazar or the wife of the actor whose career started going downhill? Share your thoughts in the comments.